It's a video sequence for the ages. A former president shot at mid-speech, but then standing up on his feet from among a group of security personnel. This is what that looked like.
And then the worst president in the history of our
Donald
country
Trump making a speech in Butler, Pennsylvania,
look what happened to our country.
just over the weekend.
Probably 20 million people.
Turning right to look at a chart on immigration.
That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
And then this happens. Those three words there, fight, 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 that all-important moment in this video sequence. That, of course, happened over the weekend, but has it already decided the outcome of the US election? Will it even have an impact? That's what we're discussing today on Newsdesk. I'm Biresh Banerjee.
And I'm Alex Forrest-Whiting, and I will be looking at your comments and your questions, feeding them into our conversation. So do please put them in the chat, because it'd be great to hear what you've got to say. We have already had quite a lot of comments, actually, already on our community post. I'm going to just read out a few of them. MW says, of course it is a game changer. This assures his win, in my opinion. His win, of course, being Donald Trump's. At Calvin says it will only solidify his voter base. At Alon K says in the short term, definitely, so it will make a difference. In the long term, however, it's difficult to say. We Americans tend not to have such long memories. And Rommel Gaviola says, I'm sorry for what happened to him, but that will never change many Americans on how they vote. Americans know his attitude. So thanks very much for those comments so far. As I said, do please put them into the chat, and we will try to get to as many as we possibly can. Let me just introduce you to who is around the desk at the moment. We've got Jared Reed, who is going to be feeding in some data, some information, reminding us exactly what has happened and why we're discussing this topic. So thank you very much for, of course, being here. We have also Dr. Johannes Timm. He is a US political analyst from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, SWP. It's quite a long title, that, isn't it? So
yes, especially in English.
In English, SWP, I can say that one. So thank you very much for being here, especially being here with us around this table. That's great. And also we have Cherry Chan, who many of you will know. She is in the chat. She will be looking at your comments, making sure that you stay nice in those comments, and also feeding some of that information back into the conversation. So thank you.
And I would also remind everyone about our poll question. Today, our poll question is, how much will the assassination attempt matter on November 5th, which is the election day? We have three options: a lot, not at all, or it could influence swing voters. So don't forget to vote, and we will talk about the result later.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Cherry. I think we should just rename you Cherry Chat, because you're generally always in the chat. That was a really bad joke, but I just had to make it, get it off my chest. Now that it's off my chest, we can also let you know that later we'll be joined by DW's very own Washington Bureau Chief Ines Pohl, who is going to be joining us from Milwaukee, where the Republican National Convention is currently underway. We'll be getting an idea of what it actually feels like on the ground after this assassination attempt over the weekend. And of course, we'll be talking to Johannes later in the program. Thanks again, Johannes, for making the time for that. But let's just get started and get some context here as to where we are right now. More than a couple of days after this assassination attempt. And Jared, you're going to help us do that, aren't you?
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago, but also not very long in some weird way. So as you might expect, there are quite some investigations happening. So let's start with those. Firstly, Joe Biden's ordered an independent review, and then the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security has ordered an investigation into the security services preparation for the rally at which Trump was shot. And just to remind everyone, it is the Secret Service that is responsible for protecting presidents and former presidents. Republicans in Congress too have also promised investigations. Lots of questions too swirling, given all that, how this could have happened. I'm going to bring up this investigation map that was prepared by the Associated Press. Some of you might have also seen the clip of the eyewitness who spoke to the BBC saying that he saw the shooter climb onto this building here. He said he told police officers and that they didn't immediately respond and that they appeared confused, after which, according to this eyewitness, the shooting took place of Donald Trump around 135 metres away. Then, of course, the gunman himself was killed. He's been identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, someone who it seems hasn't really left much of a footprint behind in terms of statements, social media posts that might point to some kind of motive. The FBI has been looking through his cell phone, his computer, his home, his car, and interviewed over 100 people to try and ascertain why he might have done this. An anonymous official who spoke to AP, who knows about the investigation, said that after looking through the phone, there wasn't really any meaningful clues that would point them in any kind of direction. And also they're not sure whether he acted alone or whether he was assisted or acted with others. There are a lot of questions too about this guy's political leanings. He was registered as a Republican in Pennsylvania, but it's then been shown he made a small donation to a progressive political action committee on the day that Joe Biden became president. Classmates have described him as a smart guy, but kind of a loner who had been bullied in the past. Moving along from that, we heard from Donald Trump by way of an interview with the conservative outlet The Washington Examiner shortly after the shooting. He explained that he actually scrapped a speech that he had planned to give to the Republican National Committee later on this week, but we can bring up Donald Trump's quote here. He says, "I basically had a speech that was an unbelievable rip-roarer. It was brutal, really good, really tough, but I threw it out. I think it would be very bad if I got up and started going wild about how horrible everybody is and how corrupt and crooked, even if it's true. Had this not happened, we had a speech that was pretty well set, that was extremely tough. Now we have a speech that's more unifying." And this appeal for calm and unity is something that we've also heard from President Joe Biden too, who spoke yesterday from the state of Nevada. Let's listen to what Joe Biden had to say.
I'm truly honored to be here, to meet at this tense moment in this country, and it is a tense moment. Just a few days after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, we're grateful he was not seriously injured. We continue to pray for him and his family. It's time for an important conversation in this country. Our politics has gotten too heated. I've said in the Oval Office on Sunday night, as I made clear throughout my presidency, we all have a responsibility to lower the temperature and condemn violence in any form.
So US President Joe Biden there. As I mentioned, this is all happening while the Republican National Committee is taking place in Wisconsin. Trump has been nominated as the Republican candidate. He's due to accept that at a keynote speech that everyone's going to be watching tomorrow. He's also announced someone called J.D. Vance. He's a 39-year-old Ohio senator as his running mate, someone who in the last couple of years has turned from, I guess, a really staunch critic of Donald Trump into one of his most staunch supporters. So, yeah, interesting
Surprising
times.
Surprising how they turn, don't they? Not just him, but yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. You were already at the end of your thing. All right.
Could I just quickly, Marty Tube has just put this message on the chat. My neighbour who had a Biden sign outside for 4 years took it down. and put a Trump sign up. So that is following that shooting.
I wonder if that is because of the shooting. Maybe it is. I mean, maybe this is where we bring you in, Johannes. We were talking about this. I don't know. What are your initial thoughts? Don't give me the entire complete answer because it's a very long answer. What are your initial thoughts? Is this attempted assassination going to change the course of this election?
I think it's too early to tell how lasting the change will be. I think for the moment it is certainly changing the dynamic of the election. We have heard from the Biden campaign they have taken down some of their advertisement. Everybody is calling for calm, for the temperature to be lowered, to have less attacks. And this in itself changes the campaign. It changes the dynamic. It changes the trajectory of the campaign. How lasting the impact of the shooting itself is, I'm not so sure. But I do think it matters in several different ways. It matters both on how Trump is being perceived as the Republican candidate, but it also matters on the conversation that is ongoing about whether Joe Biden is the right candidate for the Democrats.
And we're going to try and sort of approach this with, let's talk about Trump in the initial part of our conversation, and then we can focus on Joe Biden in the latter part of this conversation. But just in terms of you saying that this is going to change the dynamics of the election race, what do you mean by that? Do you mean the nature of debate, the tonality of it? It becomes, I don't know, softer and more polite. Some of the vengeful talk that has generally come from the Donald Trump camp, does that disappear? What are you expecting to happen?
Well, first of all, it allows Donald Trump to portray himself as a victim, right? And that was his narrative all along. First, he was a victim of unfair prosecutions, according to himself. He was saying the deep state was out to get him, and now he has an attempted assassination on him that feeds into this narrative that the world is out to get him. So that is some kind of vindication of his narrative. It also allows him to change the conversation. I mean, a central part of the Biden campaign was to say that Donald Trump is a threat on American democracy. And this was also, it was a central line of attack of the Biden campaign, and it's really the center of the campaign itself. It was not so much about what Joe Biden wants to do in his next 4 years, should he be elected. It was more Donald Trump and his administration, should he be elected, are a threat to democracy. And this is harder to argue now among calls that everybody says we should refrain from inciting rhetoric. We know J.D. Vance, the senator who was appointed vice presidential candidate on Monday, came out very quickly condemning Joe Biden for his attacks on Donald Trump and saying there is a link between those attacks and the attempted assassination. Now, we don't know if that's true because we don't know what the motive of the shooter was.
But he certainly seized on the opportunity to try.
He seized on the opportunity. He put Biden on the defensive. And that's what I mean when I say it changes the dynamic of the election.
I find that so interesting, and maybe we can come back to that later, because here we're talking about unity. Donald Trump is talking about making a speech that unifies people, and then you have his vice presidential pick blaming the Democrats. So it's a blame game versus unifying thing. Let's revisit that thought in a moment, but let's take you straight to Milwaukee, where DW Washington Bureau Chief Ines Pohl is standing by. Hi, Ines. Good to see you. It's rather early in the morning, and you have a long, big day ahead of you and an even longer evening. So thanks so much for making the time. I just really wanted your first impressions. You were there at the RNC when it opened on the Monday. What has the vibe been like? I mean, coming just 2 days after this assassination attempt, can you describe the vibe for us?
Yeah, it's amazing how unified really all Republicans are behind Donald Trump. I mean, just think about it. It's only a couple of months ago when we were debating whether it's possible that during this convention here they might pick another candidate, but that's totally out of reach right now. It was no question that Donald Trump would be the pick, no debates behind or before the scenes. huge celebration of him and his strength. I just found it interesting what you were talking about, how this assassination attempt might change the narrative. I totally agree on that it will be much more difficult for the critiques of Donald Trump. But it's also amazing how he used this moment with an instinct, which is really surprising or amazing, if you wish, to raise his fist and said, fight, 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 just minutes after he got nearly killed. And this is resonating here as well. We hear people always, or heard them over the course of the last 2 days, standing in little groups together or down in the floor when Donald Trump appeared in person or on the big screens everywhere. They come together, raise their fist and shout, fight, fight, fight. And that, of course, is a totally different image than what we see from Joe Biden. And I think that's also one reason why some people who were in support of Biden before are slowly shifting towards Donald Trump, because they see in him just a stronger person who seems to be more fit for office for them.
You know, you're talking about imagery. I want to play the imagery from Monday when Donald Trump made... it was an unexpected appearance, wasn't it, Ines? Because it wasn't pre-announced, and Donald Trump suddenly showed up with a new security detail, is what people are saying. We have those visuals. I'd like to just sort of play that, and maybe you can talk us through, Ines, when we finally play those images, of what that imagery is. Because as a novice, looking at it from this side of the Atlantic, it doesn't seem... Donald Trump seems a lot more sober, a lot more controlled in how he appears before the public. Would that be a correct reading?
In the moment, I agree on that. And I think the first night he appeared, he looked also tired and how shall I say that? Not weak, but touched by what happened to him. I mean, totally understandable, of course. He appeared different last night, much stronger, much like the old Donald Trump, if you wish, in his appearance. But it was quite impressive how he walked in there with this, I don't know, 20 or so bodyguards around him. And of course, this just underlines, and that's what he wants, underlines the threat he's facing, underlines the fact you were just talking about him, how much in danger he is. And he wants to present himself as a hero, of course, saying, you know, I put my life at risk for you guys. I'm doing everything to serve this country. And that was the imagery, how he walked in there with his ear taped. That was also actually a big debate. We talked with a lot of delegates who came here to Milwaukee, what they think, how he would appear, how he would cover his ear, would he cover his ear or not. So he came in there with this white bandage, with this fairly small bandage. Some expected him to have a big bandage around his head, but he walked in there, yes, if you wish, in a way humble, right, on this first Monday. But again, yesterday he appeared more like the former Donald Trump, and I'm sure when he will deliver his acceptance speech on Thursday, he will be very like the way he used to be, strong. And I expect him also to be somewhat aggressive again. Even so, I think he might shift his strategy a little bit, being a little bit more the good cop and leaving the bad cop, the bloodhound kind of person to J.D. Vance, his VP pick.
What is it that the delegates at the RNC want to see? Do they want to see the old Trump, or do they like this slightly more sober version of Trump? Some would even say perhaps presidential. What do they want to see?
I think actually they want to see both. You know, this is not a Trump rally. These are delegates, these are policymakers, these are lawmakers. Many lawyers are here. We talked to many who were also before the convention started on Sunday, but also throughout the last 2 days. Many of them were really still in deep shock about the assassination attempt, and they want the political discourse in this country to calm down. And of course, many are aware that Donald Trump himself plays a major role in the toxic environment. So you have this crowd, and I think they wished for a president who is more presidential, who is not so chaotic and not so divisive. But then you have also all those supporter, kind of the MAGA supporter, the Make America Great Republicans, they want a strong leader. They want someone who is able, in their opinion, to scare other world leaders because they think that's the way how the United States should present themselves on the world stage, and this is how an American president, or that's the only way how an American president, for example, would be able to handle people like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping, the Chinese head of state. So you have kind of these two parts or two bodies in the Republican Party.
And this RNC, I mean, you've covered other RNCs, Ines. I mean, does this feel different? Does this feel, I don't know, should I use the word special? But anyways, does it feel different to previous RNCs coming as it does after an assassination attempt on the main candidate?
You know, the longer the assassination attempt is away, the less it dominates the discourse. That's interesting. It was really the topic on Sunday, of course on Monday, somewhat yesterday, but now they're slowly moving into other areas like the economy, of course. Yesterday we heard a lot of talk again about immigration. I'm sure that Donald Trump will try to harvest on this assassination attempt on Thursday, but he also definitely will talk about politics, and he will talk a lot about migration and about the economy, because he thinks these are the major vulnerabilities of the Biden campaign. And then, of course, he will prove how fit he is and how strong he is, and also how kind of well he got out of this horrible assassination attempt.
And I just want to pick up on something that Carolina Vilina has said, which I think you've probably already answered, really, Ines. She is asking you directly, what do you think about Trump's presence and facial expressions nowadays since the incident? And you did say that actually on Monday, when he did come out to that adventure, he was a little bit more, I don't know if we can say withdrawn, but it wasn't the usual Donald Trump that we're used to. But you're expecting that then, that's already changed since Monday?
I think so, you know, and it's really not a surprise, right? Just think about it. This man just got killed. It was centimeters away. It was really good luck. Some people, or many people here, say that Lord the Almighty, I'm quoting here, has had a hand in that, and he was the one who protected him. That's actually really many people told us that here. That's also telling how religious many of the attendees here at the RNC. But yes, he is. It's kind of hard to find the right words for that, because I really want us to be respectful with Donald Trump, what he's going through here. But as he is a politician, and as he also knows how to use events in his favor, as all politicians do and have to in a way, I think he's slowly getting out of this first shock. And it shall be interesting to see how he will use this horrible incident over the next weeks and months to come. What is also amazing is how fast they were here with printing T-shirts. They're all over the place. This famous picture, I think it's famous
Hold that
now.
thought. We have a picture of that.
Yeah,
we have a picture of that. Ines, let us put that
the
up.
T-shirts.
And then maybe you can address that. But please go on as we search for those images.
I've got the T-shirts here.
I think maybe Jared can sort of throw that up.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Ines. Sorry for interrupting you. You were talking about the T-shirts. I think the T-shirts are
No, of course.
Yeah,
No, sorry.
There it is.
Yeah, so the
we
T-shirts
put it.
are all over. We see them now, right?
Yes.
The T-shirts?
That's the one, yeah.
Awesome.
But I think they've
Sometimes a little difficult to be so far away.
Yeah, I know. we try and get this connection up, and it works most of the time. But I think you can see most of us. But these T-shirts have now been pulled, right, by the manufacturer. They should no longer be available. Is that correct, or have I misheard things?
Well, They try to take them off because it's definitely of copyright issues. But, you know, we saw some guys that just really printed them maybe more or less themselves, and they changed the image a little bit. But they used the theme of this picture, Donald Trump raising his fist and the American flag in the back, and you see some red spots on his face. It's not like a reprint of the photo, but it's using the image, and it's kind of a little bit artsy-wise changed. But these images are everywhere, and I wonder how long it takes before we see also cups and maybe heads. This will definitely dominate kind of the imagery of Donald Trump and over the next weeks, I'm sure.
Ines, stay on the line.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Sorry, Ines, Irene Adler, just picking up on something you said about Trump being particularly strong or considered strong if you're looking at Putin, if you're looking at President Xi. And Irene Adler says Trump isn't scaring Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping. In fact, I think they would be elated if he were re-elected, and foreign influence is still an issue during this election. There's a sort of question mark there as well. So maybe you'd just like to quickly come back at that.
You know, this might be actually true, but this is definitely not the mood or the take of the attendees of this RNC here, and I'm sure about many Republican voters. They really think that Donald Trump is the only person here in the United States who could stop Xi from overtaking the world, who is able to stop Putin from invading other countries. Actually, many Republicans told us over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 months that with President Trump in the White House, in office, Vladimir Putin would have never dared to invade Ukraine. And therefore, that's one reason why they think former President Donald Trump should be back in the White House. They believe that he could give Putin one phone call saying, hey, stop this war, and the war would be over. That's really how many Republicans see Donald Trump.
Ines, stay on the line because I wanted to bring in Johannes there. Johannes, just based on what Ines is saying, based on reporting from the ground, what are you expecting to hear on Thursday from Donald Trump when he makes that official acceptance speech, I think?
I'm not going to make any predictions on how Donald Trump will handle this moment. We've heard that he wants to tone down his speech. I think we shouldn't underestimate how good Trump's instinct for the public mood is. And he has come to the conclusion for now that he benefits from this message of unity. He knows Joe Biden wants to attack him as a very divisive leader, as a leader who has called for violence himself many times, as a threat to democracy. And he now sees a chance to deflect that image and sort of profit from this incident to deflect this image. On the other hand, he's very erratic. So he might have written a speech that is much more conciliatory, but he might go off the teleprompter and he might become spontaneous and he might say all sorts of things. So I can't really predict what he's going to do on Thursday. But for now, he's come to the conclusion, and I think he's right about that. It just speaks to his intelligence when it comes to how to conduct campaigns and how to conduct yourself in the media. He's come to the conclusion that he benefits from this more soft-edged image that he's given the last 2 days.
This is exactly what we were talking about before we began the program, before we began the conversation this morning. You and I were talking about this, and I think you were also listening to that conversation about whether he stays on script or he goes off-piste.
Yeah, and just with the, you're talking of going off, deciding not to follow the teleprompter or following it, but then blaming the teleprompter operator. We had Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin who accused Democratic policies of being a clear and present danger to the US at the convention, and then he actually blamed the teleprompter operator for not updating his speech to being more conciliatory and more focused on unity. So maybe it might be a similar
Well, I think
situation.
Donald Trump has shown over the past weeks that he can be disciplined too if he wants to. I mean, we had the incident of the bad performance of Joe Biden during the debate with Donald Trump, and there was weeks of internal Democratic debate. And during those weeks, Donald Trump hasn't said anything. Usually he can't stay out of the limelight for more than half an hour, basically. He always wants to drive the news cycle. But there he recognized that this debate among Democrats, this show of disunity among Democrats could aid him, and he actually let it happen, and he stayed out of the limelight. So he might do that on Thursday too, we just don't know.
Do you think that was his own choice to do that, or he would have had people saying, look, just be quiet for a second, this is working out how we need it to?
No, of course he has a very professional campaign. This time his campaign staff is much more professional than in 2016, the first time around, and they will have advised him to do that. But in the past, we've also seen that Donald Trump is very hard to advise, that you can't control him. And if he feels like doing something, then he will go ahead and do it. And in this instance, he chose to discipline himself. And I don't know if that's sort of the way things are going from now on, or I'm pretty sure there will be moments where he will be unscripted and where he just can control himself, but we don't know if Thursday that's going to be the case.
Let's bring Ines in on this. Ines, you've been reporting from the US for quite some time. You also covered the 2016 election that brought Trump to power. Has his campaign team, I'm sure it's not the same campaign team, but then the people who have advised him, have they learned something over the past 8 years? And is he getting better advice now? And is he getting better at following the advice that he's being given?
Oh yeah, he's as we just heard, he's gotten much more professional, and he has got much better, if you wish, advisors around him. You know what I found interesting, and I'm sure many remember that during the debate with Joe Biden, and this kind of shows how disciplined he indeed can be. When Joe Biden was mumbling and lost his meaning in his long sentence, he didn't pick it up. He didn't perk on it. He just said very dry, oh, I didn't know what he said. And this is a new attitude. I think in that regard, he really changed his appearance, and he wants to definitely be much more presidential, because he also knows that he needs to perform different than from 8 years ago when he won the election, because many people don't want this president he was in his first term. He want a more controlled, a less chaotic, a more presidential president. And he knows exactly what he's doing. Can he help himself? When he's on stage Thursday evening, he's supposed to speak for 90 minutes or so in this arena with hundreds of people shouting at him. I'm sure that will give him a lot of energy, and we shall see how it plays out. But as I said early on, I really think there will be a little bit of a role play here with Vance on the one side and him on the other side, so they can reach out kind of to both needs, within the Republican Party.
Can I just
both wings, probably. Speaking
of this Republican Party, I mean, is it also fair to say that the Republican Party is uniting completely behind Donald Trump? And the reason I'm trying to ask you that is because basically we saw this long line of former contestants or former contenders for the presidential nomination basically back Donald Trump last night. You had Marco Rubio, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, all of these people just lining up behind Trump. Essentially, there is no opposition at all, and the Republicans are completely united behind him. Is that correct to say as well?
Yes and no. It was for me really especially astonishing to hear Nikki Haley, because I covered her during the primaries and saw her in really small venues 3 or 4 times, hearing her saying that Donald Trump is the threat to democracy, saying that the Republican Party has a hole, or the ship of the Republican Party has a hole, and this is Donald Trump. And here she was yesterday. Of course, she said, you don't have to agree with Donald Trump 100%. I know what I'm talking about, but still unite behind him. So that for me was really amazing, because as we all remember, she was the last one standing, and there was a lot of hope that if Donald Trump might be forced to drop out, that she could become the presidential nominee. And it's really important for Trump to get her support and her supporters, of course. The unity, I don't know, we also see some cracks here, because not everybody is happy with Vance. I mean, we also have interventionalists in the Republican Party. We have many lawmakers who support helping Ukraine. We hear that all the time when we go up to the Hill, and they were kind of shocked when the news broke that Vance will become the VP. Someone who is so much against helping Ukraine and spending money to help other countries. Of course, in front of the camera, everybody now unites behind Trump and his pick. But that shall be interesting to watch over the next weeks if this crack kind of widens or deepens.
If I can jump in here for a second. I agree with Ines Pohl that the endorsement of Nikki Haley is very important. It's remarkable because she has come out against him quite strongly at the end of her campaign, before she ended her campaign. It is very important because many of her supporters, the people who voted for Nikki Haley during the primaries, they're not sure Republican voters. It's not clear that they will vote for Trump. Many of them were sure they would vote Republican with Nikki Haley as a candidate, but they might stay home or vote Democrat or for a third-party candidate with Trump as the nominee. And now Nikki Haley endorsed him and basically has signaled to her own base and given sort of the never Trump faction of the Republican Party a permission to say it's okay to vote for this guy if he's the nominee of our party. So that's very significant. And one other small observation, of course, it's a party convention. So the people who are going to speak there are going to be endorsing Trump.
Right.
It's also important to note who's not there. Mike Pence, the former vice president, is not there. Mitt Romney, senator, is not there. Former President George W. Bush is not there. So the people who don't support Trump, they just stayed away, but they have not much relevance left. They're going to be out of office. They already are out of office, or they're going to be out of office soon. So the organized Republican Party is very firmly behind Trump right now.
You know, just on this point you're making, that if Nikki Haley giving permission, so to speak, or I don't know, encouraging her base to now vote for Donald Trump and say it's okay to vote for him, and therefore they might do that. I mean, do they even need that permission? And the reason I ask is, isn't America so divided along political lines? It is so entrenched that it doesn't really matter whether you give somebody permission or not. They're already along divided in entrenched lines, and therefore potentially, going back to this assassination attempt, it may not have that much of an effect in the long term.
That's exactly right. America is very divided among partisan lines. It's very polarized, and partisanship has been very solidified in recent years. It used to be more normal that people would go back and forth between parties, or that they would split the ticket, as they call it, vote for a Republican candidate for president, for a Democratic candidate for Senate, for example. That happens very rarely. But having said that, the people who still go back and forth and the people who still haven't made up their mind, they're the ones who will matter in the end. It's a very small group of people, relatively speaking, but they're the ones who are going to decide the election. And the people who are firmly committed to Trump, most of the Republican Party has been firmly committed to Trump for a long time, and they're not going to be shaken. But they're not actually enough to win the election. So Trump needs to expand his base a little bit to include some of those swing voters, or if you want to call them moderate Republicans and so on. And that's where the differences are on the margin, and that's where these things matter. And that's where the assassination attempt might make a difference.
Let's go to Ines. Ines, are there enough swing voters in America who are not necessarily tied down to party lines and divided along this big political divide to, I don't know, vote for the opposite camp?
I think it's just perfectly right what we heard, that Nikki Haley's support, also from Ramaswamy, who is rather like reaching out to younger voters, really matters, because, of course, there are still many Americans who don't like Donald Trump. Does this assassination attempt change that or does this kind of change last until November? I'm not so sure. So these endorsements do matter a lot. It's, you know, I've covered the RNC 8 years ago, and that was a totally different Republican Party. We also heard that right now, that it was debating. There was still debates within the party: who is the better nominee, what politics do we support, do we go rather a little bit further to the right or to the left or whatever. But this is all silenced now. If you really kind of follow these Donald Trump events, and even here in Milwaukee right now, it very much feels like a cult. There is no healthy opposition, no healthy debate. Also, a Democratic Party needs to debate whether they are for helping Ukraine or not, whether they have this economic idea or not. But here, it's like it's so unified. And as we also just heard, the politicians who have a critical stand against Donald Trump, they're not here, they're not welcomed, and they don't. And many lawmakers are leaving the Senate or the House because they don't see that they have any place in the current Republican Party. That is definitely different from 4 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, I know you have a long day ahead of you, so let's just get some crystal ball gazing from you, Ines. There's still a few days left for the RNC, well, a couple of days. What should people be watching out for over today and tomorrow?
So tonight, J.D. Vance, the VP pick, will be speaking. That's going to be interesting. How will he present himself? Is he also becoming a little bit more presidential or not? We shall see. And then, of course, there is Donald Trump on Thursday night. He's expected to speak 90 minutes or so. I'm sure the world will be watching it. But talking about today, it shall be also interesting if Donald Trump comes on stage with J.D. Vance or not, and to really see them for the first time interacting again together in front of a bigger audience. So these are the two major events I think people should be watching. And we definitely will be there, and also definitely will be reporting about it, of course.
I was just about to say, and I'm glad that you said it. A very long day ahead for you, Ines. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I think it's, 8:30 in Milwaukee. Thanks so much. Take care. Have a good RNC, if I can say that to you. Bye.
Thank you. And quite a lot of...
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. And quite a lot of comments, just to say thanks to everyone in the chat, all talking about endorsements, whether they matter or whether they don't matter. So hopefully, from what Ines was saying there, and Johannes as well, hopefully you've engaged in that conversation and some of those questions have been answered. So thank you very much for that.
I have a number of other questions, but before we get to those questions, should we just go to you, Cherry, and just find out what you're seeing in the chat? Because I haven't been focused on it as much as you have, or for that matter, you have. So.
Yeah, right. I find some very interesting questions in the chat, actually, that we haven't talked about. Maybe we can put it to our experts. There are two people who raised the question of, after this assassination, will Trump actually talk about gun ban or the gun control law?
Yeah.
And I think we can address this, and I think people are really interested.
That question on gun control.
Yeah.
Do you think that this prompts Trump to have another look at gun control? Because he, along with the Republican Party, has been very against any amendments or laws. I mean, I think the message that has generally gone out is that the Democrats want to take the guns away, right? I mean, a fundamental right for most Americans. Is it time to address gun control?
Is it time? Yes. Are Republicans going to do it? No.
No.
That's a very simple answer. I mean, we've already seen during the last few days that almost nobody has brought this up as an issue. I mean, it seems to me very obvious. The gunman used an AR-15 style rifle, a semi-automatic weapon that is always the focus of any kind of gun control legislation, because they're basically military-style rifles which allow you to fire very many rounds in very short time, and they're the weapon of choice of all these mass shooters. All the mass shootings that we've experienced in the last years, and not just assassinations, but school shootings in elementary schools, all these horrific shootings were always committed with AR-15. So that would be an obvious place to start if you really wanted to do something about gun violence. But Republicans are so fortified in their position that that is a no-no for them. And apparently Democrats are afraid to talk about it in this current climate. That's also an interesting observation.
And that's coming up in the chat as well. Zed Alpha, Trump will never call for gun control. And Youssef El Tine, and Trump will never call for gun control. There you go, exactly the same one. So that seems to be what other people are agreeing with as well.
An indication of what you were saying there. I mean, let's expand that. I mean, to me, gun control seems to be an issue that no one is talking about. But will issues be important front and center in this election? I mean, Ines was talking about immigration and the economy. Do you think that these issues are going to be important in the 4 months moving forward to the election?
They are going to be important, but less so than in previous elections.
Really?
Yes. I think Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to make crime an issue. They're trying to make immigration an issue. And they're trying to make the economy an issue. With the economy, it's interesting because according to statistical measures, the economy is actually doing quite well. The US has experienced growth. They have almost full employment. Even inequality has receded in the last few years. So Joe Biden has been somewhat successful on the economic policy. US is, for example, doing much better than Europe is doing economically at the moment. But somehow that message is not getting through. Even inflation is down, but people don't look at the current inflation rate. They compare the prices of today to the prices a few years ago, and they're still higher today, so they still perceive this more as a problem than as anything good. Mm-hmm. And so this ties into President Biden's effectiveness as a candidate. The fact that he's not been able to get his message out shows his weaknesses as a candidate, right? And I want to make one point that I think might be the most important consequence of this assassination attempt, which is it has basically shut down the debate within the Democratic Party about Biden's viability as a presidential candidate.
It hasn't shut down the debate over here because I was going to bring it up.
Right.
But I will do it in a moment. But please go on.
No, I mean, if we're talking about the issues, this campaign has been about the candidates from the beginning. And Biden's main message is don't let Donald Trump become president because he's dangerous. And Biden's main liability is his age. And I think both candidates are generally not liked by the public. Their disapproval ratings for both of them are at record heights. So most of the public would prefer someone else, pretty much anyone else than those two candidates. And now it's kind of a choice between two evils for the lesser evil. And this is why the poor debate performance.
That's just a figure of speech. You don't really believe that they're both evil. It's just a figure of speech.
I can show a graph about that. We have a graph from Statista it's showing us the presidential polling of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump from January of last year to June of this year. Dustin, you might want to bring that up on my screen, and we can just sort of see how it's
Just to be clear, Dustin is a producer who is sitting in the technical room with our technical crew.
Exactly.
So where did that name come from? That is what Dustin is.
That's it, yeah. Dustin is the guy in the background. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can, maybe you might want to speak to that a little bit, Johannes. We can sort of see how it's sort of being fluctuating over the last, I guess, year and a half.
Quite small for you to see it over there, isn't it?
But then those fluctuations, just, I don't know if our viewers can see this. I think maybe we'll just post a link so that our viewers can, you guys can sort of have a look at this in your own free time. But there isn't a huge margin. The gaps look very big, but there isn't a big difference. For example, that biggest gap, and I think that is somewhere around January this year or a little before January.
December sort of last year.
That's
exactly.
like 47% for Donald Trump and somewhere around 44% or something for Joe Biden. It's not a huge gap, but a significant one. But Johannes, please, you were saying.
No, I mean, this is basically it. Both candidates are very unpopular. And most voters weren't ready to accept that these are the two choices that will be presented to them until very recently.
But there wasn't going to be anybody else. It was quite clear it was going to be these two, wasn't it? I mean,
that's correct. But we have this discussion about Joe Biden's age now, and voters have been discussing this for a year now. It's only recently hit sort of the circles of Democratic operatives that they were always sure that it was going to be Joe Biden. And now the people who want to defend Joe Biden as a candidate kind of say this is the media bringing this up artificially, which is just not true. It was on voters' minds from the beginning. We know this from polls. We know this from focus groups. It was the Democratic elites who said, no, everything is going to be fine. Joe Biden has a good record, which is true. His 3.5 years as president so far have been very successful. He's going to be a good candidate. And only now is this issue breaking to the forefront and making it much more difficult for Joe Biden to attack Donald Trump.
And let me just pick up on that from the chat. John Conrath had asked actually earlier, he wanted to ask Ines this, but obviously Ines has had to get back to the day job, whether there were any reports on the likelihood of Biden now remaining as the Democratic nominee, given what happened in the debate and now what's happened, obviously, with this attempted assassination of Trump. What's your view of that?
So the starting point for this debate within the Democratic Party was Biden's performance at the presidential debate with Donald Trump, which was catastrophic. So we've already mentioned this, he ended in mid-sentence, he couldn't finish his thoughts, he seemed very frail and very weak. And that has started a huge debate within the Democratic Party, among Democratic voters, among Democratic donors, whether he's the right candidate. And this debate was picking up steam, and most congressmen in the Democratic Party are very loyal, and they were hesitant to come out against Joe Biden. But quite a lot have, actually, in the weeks after the debate. So there was a very, very active debate, which was basically shut down now by the assassination attempt. So I'm not aware of any Democrat who has come out against Joe Biden as their presidential candidate since last Friday.
And do you think that will change, or do you think that's it now?
I have no idea, but time is running very shortly.
Yeah, because they've got to make a decision, haven't they, in a few weeks' time?
The Democratic convention is in mid-August, so that would be sort of the very last possibility to change around the candidate. First of all, we should say the only possibility to change the candidate is if Biden agrees to it, right? He alone, he won the primary. He has the delegates to be nominated. They are committed to him. They have to vote for him. And only should he voluntarily step aside and say it's time to make room for someone new, would those delegates become unpledged and could vote for someone else. And that could be at the Democratic Convention in mid-August. But we now read in the press that there are actually attempts by supporters of Biden to have a video conference call in early August, so even before the Democratic Convention, where they're trying to count the votes and sort of solidify his candidacy. And so far, Joe Biden has given no sign of intending to make room for anybody else.
So what is the offering then from Joe Biden at a time that his opponent is just coming off of the back of an attempted assassination? Maybe there's a sympathy vote, maybe swing voters go to him, maybe moderate Republicans vote for him. What is the offering that Joe Biden is making to the public as to why not just swing voters, but why the Democrats should vote for him?
That's a good question. I'm not so sure. He is running on his record. He said, I've done a good job as president. I'm the best guy to beat Donald Trump. I'm not sure if that's true. Actually, I believe it not to be true at this point. But he has this mindset that everybody has always bet against him and he's always overcome those odds. And he seems to be truly convinced that he's the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. And the problem is that he has been behind in the polls even before the debate with Donald Trump.
But not by very much.
Not by very much. It was very close. It was very close. But he has been behind. He would have to lead a very active campaign to make up that ground. Then came the debate, and he lost more. Not in terms of percentage, not dramatic, but as I said before, it's the margin that matter.
Right.
So 1 or 2% in the swing states are going to decide the outcome of the election. Yeah. And so the debate hurt him badly. They undermined his message that he's the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. They showed that it's not very likely that he's going to have a very active campaign from now on out. I don't think he's able to. He himself, he said he was going to cut back on his schedule. He was not going to schedule events late at night anymore and so on.
Right.
And he's trying to convince the public that he can be president, one of the toughest jobs in the world, for another 4 years. That's a real uphill battle. And so I think any other candidate would have a better chance.
Would they really have a better chance? Because that was the question I was coming to. Because it's like we're less than 4 months, right? I mean, am I calculating this correctly?
November.
It's about 4 months.
about
Let's go
4
with about
months,
4
yeah,
months.
yeah.
We're about 4 months. If today Joe Biden were to drop out, I mean, how fast would things have to move for another candidate to replace him and build up enough steam to go into the 5th of November with enough momentum behind you?
This is basically the main argument of the supporters of Biden,
Well,
and
the money,
it's true. It's a very short time period. It would be a very risky course. It would be, you could have chaos at the convention. I mean, it's not clear that they would agree on another candidate, right? There could be a competition between several candidates, which could get very messy. We didn't have this kind of situation since 1968. So it's a very high-risk course to take. But I actually think it's sort of the only course now. I think the likelihood that Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump is so low that even if it was a very high-risk approach to try to exchange the candidate at this point, it would have a better chance of success than just staying the course. Because honestly, I mean, I'm not predicting an outcome here. We don't know what happens between... We just saw last weekend how things that nobody expected can happen out of the blue. And something else could happen between now and Election Day that would change the whole dynamic of the election again. So I'm not saying it's over, it's a done deal, but if nothing dramatic changes between now and November 5th, I really think it's almost impossible for Joe Biden to win this election. And I think somebody else, whether it be Kamala Harris, his vice president, or another of the Democratic contenders that are being discussed, would have a better chance.
But they have all backed him. Just something that really struck me, because I think it was on Tuesday that the Democratic National Committee announced an extra $15 million as investment in 7 key swing states, right? And this was Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which are going to be key to this election. I think we can all agree on that. Do you think that this extra funding, $15 million in key swing states, and Biden won 6 of these except North Carolina in 2020, will that make a difference, or that's irrelevant because the candidate remains Biden?
Of course, money can make a difference, but let me just say, on Monday, Elon Musk has endorsed Donald Trump and has pledged to spend a lot of money on Donald Trump's campaign. The talk was, I think, up to $45 million a month from now until the election. Miriam Adelson, another billionaire, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, who made his money in casinos, has now gotten into the race. So if anything, Biden's money advantage, which he had so far, is getting smaller. And in terms of what you said about the states, those are the swing states that decided the last election.
Right.
And Biden has to win a certain number of those. The most likely path to success for Joe Biden would be if he would win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. That would be enough if nothing else changes. But now, after the debate, some of the formerly secure Democratic states are actually being considered in play. So it's not even sure. Maybe the Democrats have to play defense in some of the states that they assumed they would hold. For example, Maine, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and Virginia. So the dynamic doesn't look good. He has to hold on to the states that he had last time, and he has to win at least 3 of those 7 swing states that you just mentioned.
There's another debate coming up, isn't it, in September? Is that correct? I mean, could that be another turning point if nothing else happens before that?
Well, I don't see how that's going to be a turning point that...
Oh, come on, be an optimist, Johannes.
I don't see how it's going to be a turning point that's going to change anything dramatically in favor of Biden. The best outcome is that he has an okay debate and allays some of those doubts and fears that he had in the last debate. But what I'm worried about is it's not just the second debate. It's another 3.5 months of campaign events where there could be any number of things where he screws up again, to put it bluntly. And we know age is not kind, and age usually, I mean, he has good days and bad days. That is true. Has given a few interviews since the debate to allay those fears. One with George Stephanopoulos of ABC, one with Lester Holt of NBC. But they were short interviews. They were sort of softball questions. Well, some of the questions were critical, but he had all the time he needed to answer those questions. They were not high-stress situations. They were not like a debate, and they were not like an unscripted campaign event. And I really have doubt whether he can keep up the schedule that would be needed to persuade voters that aren't persuaded by now.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, sure.
Does Joe Biden have to do these debates? Because he performed, as you say, so badly last time. What's the point of making him do it again if you were his advisor? Does he really have to do them?
Well, now he has to, because now he has to combat the image that he's created during the first debate. If he just lets that stand, that's sort of the worst possible outcome. I don't think it can get much worse from here. If he screws up the second debate the same way as he did the first one, that's going to confirm the image, but it's not going to make it worse. If anything, he can gain a little bit of ground.
So he has more to gain than to lose by doing it.
But the problem is not that he performed badly in one debate. That's what he always says. Well, I had a bad night. I'm not going to let 90 minutes define my last 4 years as president. That's Joe Biden's argument. The problem is that his debate performance feeds into a perception that the people had of him anyway. Okay. And the debates were actually his attempt and his campaign's plan to counter that image of him as an old, incapable guy. And that has completely failed and has completely confirmed the image that skeptics of him already had. And that's why it was so disastrous.
Let me just, I keep trying to jump in here because there's so many comments about this issue of Biden. So many people saying, Zed Alpha saying Biden will never step aside. I think this person's pronounced IC. Biden appears really stubborn. Fun Fact says it's not Biden but his wife who wants him to cling to power. Someone else says few can walk away from power. So this is going, on and on, saying that they don't think he's going to step aside. And someone else saying that the debate was elder abuse. So that's quite extreme. But as you say, it wasn't just this debate; it's other events as well. And we had something. Didn't we have a little montage of some of the other comments?
Yeah, I mean,
or is this now not a time to? I'm looking into his eyes, seeing if he's.
I mean, since you brought it up, I was going to bring it up earlier, but then, well, since she has brought it up, I mean, we're talking about President Biden. The debate performance and the gaffes there, but there were gaffes that were followed that debate performance, and this was last week as the NATO summit was wrapping up. He held a press conference. He made a few gaffes there, and then he held a solo press conference in which he made a few mistakes as well. And we can listen in to that soundbite compilation. I know you wanted to listen to that.
I really want to listen to that.
For Alex.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
What concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people.
It's just painful, isn't it? It was looking at President Zelensky's reaction when he was being introduced as President Putin, in particular, that was very uncomfortable.
So that's going to lose the Democrats' election.
As I said, I think people can mix up names. I mean, this is pretty brutal. If you mix up Zelensky and Putin, that's worse than some other mix-up. I mean, before the debate, there was this incident where he talked about the president of Egypt, and he said the president of Mexico, but meant the president of Egypt. That was sort of, not quite as extreme as this case. But I don't want to overemphasize these gaffes. I think they're not what matters. I think what matters is that he can't convince voters that he's up for the job and that he can do the job for another 4 years. I think that's the main problem. And as I said earlier, there are very few undecided voters left. And they tend to be so-called low information voters. They don't care very much about politics. They don't follow the news very closely, because people who do follow the news very closely, they have made up their minds. The choice is so stark between President Biden and President Trump. So most people who are interested in politics, both men have been president before, so they're not unknowns. People know what they stand for, and they've made up their mind. The ones that haven't made up their mind yet and that are going to be decisive for the election, they have low information and they go by impressions, they go by emotions, by instincts.
So personalities are going to be important for these people.
And these types of things matters. And if it gets, I mean, these things are picked up by social media, and even people who don't follow the news are going to have that in their feed, in their TikTok or in their Instagram feed, and are going to be aware of it. And that's where I see the problem. And as I said, the campaign that would be needed to catch up with Donald Trump, I don't see him capable of doing that.
And May Pluribus is saying no bump yet in the polling for Trump. Obviously, that's since that assassination attempt on Saturday. Is that correct?
I don't think we have any good polling since then. It takes time to poll people.
Yeah. So we don't know whether
we don't know. As I said, I'm not gonna. I don't expect like a huge dramatic change, but Trump is already ahead. It doesn't take a huge dramatic change.
And therefore, this assassination attempt will not make a big difference?
As I said, I think it changes the dynamic. It makes it more difficult to attack Trump, to portray him as a danger to democracy. That's kind of one of the few lines of attack that Joe Biden has left. He's banking on that. Actually, I was surprised to see in his interview with Lester Holt on NBC on Monday, he actually did keep up this line of attack. Yeah. He did moderate the tone a little bit, and he apologized for the comment he made where he said we need to put Trump in the bullseye, which in hindsight is an unfortunate formulation. He did take that back.
But that was a private call with donors, wasn't it?
Yeah, but he did lean into the larger criticism of Trump, which I think is right, that Trump is a threat to democracy, that Trump himself has called for violence, that Trump hasn't accepted the democratic outcome of the last election. So Biden himself knows that he doesn't have that many other options. So he's leaning into that, even as he's being criticized for it in the context of this assassination attempt.
Just on that point, it is Donald Trump himself who said that he'd be a dictator on day one, but not a dictator after that. I think this is a point that even the media
Well, the second part is from you. Yeah. He said you'd be a dictator only on day one.
On day one, yeah, exactly. That's what he said. I'm just sort of adding more context to that. Did you want to bring in more comments?
There have been a lot of questions from people asking why were there really only these two candidates? Why haven't there been more independents standing? And I know that's quite a big question because it's sort of the US electoral system. But is it possible to give us a short, easy to understand answer?
I think the answer is different for the Republican and the Democratic Party. For Republicans, Trump just basically took over the party and established himself as the leader. And he was challenged, and the attempts to challenge him weren't successful. Nikki Haley tried to portray a different image, and she tried to pull the Republicans back into the direction on policy issues that they had before Trump came along. And it didn't work. The Republican voters, the primary voters, which is important to note, the committed partisan voters wanted Trump. For a little while, they thought about Ron DeSantis, but then they decided they didn't really like him, and they went back to Trump. So it was decided the Democratic way by the voters. But it is important to stress that voters who participate in primaries are not representative of voters as a whole. But these committed Republican voters wanted Donald Trump. For Joe Biden, it's a mixture of tradition and respect. I mean, the incumbent has the right to be nominated again, and nobody wanted to challenge that. And as I said, Joe Biden had a good record. He also had a very good election result during the midterm elections. So the midterm elections for Congress in 2022, Democrats performed much better than the expectations were. And that strengthened his position within the party, and Then he had a good performance during his State of the Union address, and people thought he would be okay, and they kind of agreed with his assessment that he's the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. But since then, he has deteriorated, and people have changed their minds.
Right. Let's just go back to where we started from, and we were talking about the assassination attempt and whether that would matter on the 5th of November. That was the poll question that we had, and you've closed the poll, haven't you? And I saw that. And would you like to give us the results of that poll?
Yeah, I can, of course. The result is quite different from what you said, Johannes, actually. We have 532 votes, and 47% of the people think it will change a lot. The assassination will actually change a lot the election in November. 31% think that it could influence swing voters, and only 21% think that it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, it's still, I think it's still too early to tell. Once we get some poll numbers, maybe we'll have a better idea. And we still have 4 months to go. And 4 months is a very long time. An eternity, can I call it an eternity, when it comes to the US elections? I think that's about what we have today, unless you have some more.
Just one quick last comment from Squierson. Conservatives think it is game over. They win. Liberals think there are still 3 more months and people are still learning and waiting. So,
well, if I could make one last comment.
Please do. That's what I wanted to come to you for.
This was reported by Axios. It's an unnamed source, which is always kind of problematic, but an unnamed source, a high-ranking Democrat, told the reporter that they had basically resigned to Donald Trump winning the election. So it might not be true for the voters, but many in the Democratic Party who can see the polling, who can see the focus groups, are also very pessimistic about the prospects of Joe Biden.
As are you.
As I am.
Okay. Thanks for coming in. We'll leave it there for the moment. Thanks again for that such short notice coming into the studio. I think that's about it for this stream. We're back again next week, I believe, right?
We are, and we'll have a community post up about 24 hours before, so on the Tuesday before, where we will let you know what we will be talking about on Wednesday. So hopefully we will see you at the at the same time next Wednesday, and you will join us then. Thank you very much, and thanks for all your comments as well.
And thanks to everybody at the table. Thanks so much.
Thank you.